what is going on, Colts fans? Welcome back to another episode of Colts Brawl. I am your host, Cody Felger, alongside your other host, Mr. Jacob Mummert. Jacob, Colts football is almost here. We are less than a week out from kickoff down in Jacksonville. Man, how excited are you just for everything going on and just the season to get underway?
Oh, it has been a long time coming. You know, when you get these little bits and pieces from training camp, but I'm just so excited to see finally all the pieces together in the blue and white, getting ready to see how all these new pieces that we've gotten during this offseason really fit together and what's in store for this Colts team this season.
Absolutely. Hoping to get off to a hot start. The Colts have struggled in Jacksonville, so hopefully since the first time since 2014, the Colts can get a victory down there, and since 2013 can win their first game of the year. So speaking of the Colts and this roster, the Colts made roster cuts a couple days ago now. I want to touch on some of these notable waves and releases, and maybe we can kind of mention them a little bit. Offensive lineman Jake Eldrenkamp, he actually was signed to the practice squad. Wide receiver Reese Fountain, same deal there. Tight end Andrew Vollert was another one that was cut. Defensive tackle Robert Windsor, 6th-round pick, he was cut as well, but he's on the practice squad. Center Joey Hunt, the same thing. He's on the practice squad as well. Andrew Vollert and Chase McLaughlin are the two guys that were cut who were not brought back on the practice squad. And because of that, and kind of a corresponding move, the Colts claimed tight end Noah Tagiai off of waivers from Philadelphia, and they also signed defensive tackle Eli Anku. He was previously with the Cleveland Browns. So overall, Jacob, give me your thoughts on this roster and then some of these new additions the Colts have.
Yeah, so you know, it's good to hear from the organization that these cuts were so hard to make, because it shows you the depth that we have across the board. And it truly was difficult decisions for all accounts, because, I mean, it was like, you know, splitting hairs when it came to some of these guys, and especially the kicking game. From what we can tell, it was literally just, you know, little overanalyzations of things and really scrutinizing very particular things that led to Rodrigo Blankenship being chosen over Chase McLaughlin. But I'm excited for what pieces we did keep. I'm excited for the guys still on the practice squad, because who knows? I mean, they might get their shot later in the season, or hopefully, you know, just sometime throughout the season they can come in and fill a role. I'm super excited about the tight end, Noah Tagiai. I think he's going to have an instant impact, especially with the limited depth that we have at the tight end position.
Yeah, for sure. And it's kind of interesting. The Colts claimed him and a defensive tackle because they placed defensive tackle Sheldon Day and tight end Trey Burton on injured reserve, which means they're going to be out for at least 3 weeks. So I kind of look at it like this, Jacob, and maybe you agree with me here. So with Robert Windsor, a guy on the practice squad, I mean, a lot of people were surprised that he got cut initially. And I kind of heard about this and kind of got this train of thought by listening to some people kind of giving their overall thoughts on it. You know, Robert Windsor is more of a 3-technique type of guy, right? He plays more of the 3-technique position. That's what he played when he was finished at Penn State. That's kind of what he's played in training camp. And with Sheldon Day being on IR, being out for 3 weeks, the Colts needed a bigger body to back up Grover Stewart. So my thoughts are, you know, you mentioned some of these practice squad guys potentially later on down the road this season could have an impact and make this final 53-man roster. I think a guy like Robert Windsor, if Sheldon Day comes back and is fully healthy after week 3, I really think a guy like Robert Windsor could be activated onto the active roster, be your backup 3-technique position, because, you know, you'll have Sheldon Day back, and then you can release, you know, one of these guys, Anku or potentially even Taylor Stallworth as well. Give me your thoughts on that, on Robert Windsor potentially.
Yeah, so that was another surprise cut for me. I'm glad that he, you know, kind of slipped through the waivers for the Colts to keep him within the program on the practice squad, because I think he's a good talent. We just had so much depth at the defensive line this season. It's hard to keep everybody. Like I said, it was like splitting hairs. But I'm really hopeful that, once Sheldon Day gets off IR and Windsor just keeps grinding it out there with the practice squad and really impressing the coaches, that eventually he'll be able to move up. And I think, you know, he'll probably take the place of Anku or Stallworth. I think they're more kind of filling guys until we really see what Sheldon Day is going to be like. And then hopefully Windsor can continue to press on the practice squad.
For sure. And also Shaz Green is back on the active roster. He got released and then he's brought back. He's probably your 8th offensive lineman right now. Let's talk about some articles that have been recently come out on Colts Brawl. Kind of take a break from the action here. Check everybody who's listening right now should go check out our article on Malik Hooker's season and also an update on the 53-man roster. Anthony and Michael, they're doing great stuff for Colts Brawl. You guys should definitely be sure to check those out as well. You can find those at thebrawlnetwork.com/Indianapolis-Colts. So be sure to check those out. All right, let's move on now. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, Colts football is here. The Colts are hoping to get a victory in Week 1 down in Jacksonville. Kickoff starts at 1 p.m. on CBS. And it's a great start and a great test for the Colts playing against their division opponents, the Jacksonville Jaguars. But let's talk about, before we preview this game, let's talk about some of these moves the Jacksonville Jaguars have made recently. First off, releasing Leonard Fournette, trading Yannick Ngakoue, and then trading away safety Ronnie Harrison to the Browns. So it seems like, for whatever reason, even though they'll never say it, the Jaguars are kind of getting rid of a lot of their talent before the season starts. So on paper, the Colts should far and away smoke this team. But we do know, notoriously, the Colts have struggled down there in Jacksonville. Give me your overall thoughts, on this week and potentially what the Colts have to do to be sure to ensure a victory and not kind of have this be a trap game.
Yeah, so definitely you don't want to start the season into a trap situation, which this could very well turn into. Like you mentioned, our lack of success in Jacksonville, and yes, they are tanking. No team wants to admit that, but they still have some pieces on both sides of the ball that can have an impact. I think what really is going to have to nail it for us is we're going to have a strong run game, which everybody thinks we will. And then I also think that our defensive line has to be present. And, our secondary is deep this year, but some of the guys kind of in there are still coming off maybe their first season or entering maybe their second or third. So they still need, some more time to be proven and touted. So I think our defensive line has to play solid and our run game has to be through the roof, which all signs point towards those.
Yeah, and how important do you think a win is in Jacksonville in Week 1, especially considering Houston's playing Kansas City? We think potentially Kansas City will win that game. And then the Tennessee Titans are playing the Denver Broncos, and Denver Broncos are an up-and-coming team as well. So presumably all these teams in the AFC South, have potential to lose here in Week 1. So how important do you think it is for the Colts to get off to a hot start 1-0, lead the division here in Week 1?
Yeah, so I think it's important. You want to, especially with this type of offseason that we have and what the season is starting to look like, you want to get wins when you can get them. And if you can get those Week 1 and get your guys motivated and doing well, great. Go out and do that. And also, we have the unique opportunity of going up against a divisional opponent with the first game. So getting that initial leg up. And like you mentioned, maybe the Texans fall to the Chiefs, maybe the Titans fall to the Broncos. Then look, we're sitting at 1-0 in the division. So anytime I feel like you can distance yourself from some of these AFC South guys, you need to, because we're kind of a sneaky good conference, and there's competition within the conference for, at least I would say, the top 2, maybe 3 spots. So anytime you can get that leg up, I think you need to. But on the other side, there's like 16 other games. So it is important to win Week 1 and get out the gates going. But also, you gotta focus on the season at large. And I think Jacksonville's a great, Week 1 matchup, especially with the situation that they're in.
Right, and I'm kind of sick and tired of the Colts trying to play catch-up the rest of the season, starting out 0-1. So it certainly would be great for them to get off to a hot start and really start the season off strong. Get some monkeys off their backs a little bit. We already mentioned the Jacksonville thing, and then also just not winning a regular season game in the kickoff in really, I don't even remember. I think it's 2013 is the last time they did it. And if you think about that, Terrell Pryor was the Raiders quarterback. So if that tells you anything, that's how long the Colts have struggled to win a Week 1 matchup. So certainly going to be important on that aspect. All right, let's move over to some matchups now. So we'll start with the Colts offense versus the Jacksonville defense. So we'll talk about the Colts offensive line versus the Jacksonville defensive line. The Colts have one of the best offensive lines in the league. Jacksonville's lost some talent on the defensive line. Obviously, they lost Marcel Darius and some other guys, Yannick Ngakoue as well. But they still have Josh Allen. They still have Chason, who they drafted this year. What do you think about this matchup, offensive line versus defensive line?
Yeah, so I definitely think it shouldn't be taken lightly because, Josh Allen has shown what he can do. The rookie's going to show out. I mean, he's getting by all accounts, the starting nod here. So I feel like we shouldn't take it lightly, but also, like you said, we have one of the best lines in the NFL. So I'm not worried about it, but I do want us to still take this seriously and really try to get the good reps, and just stay healthy. I think is the most important part because we've talked, in previous episodes about kind of our lack of depth out of the starting five. So play safe, play strong, but take this matchup seriously.
For sure. Because they have some potential to be dangerous as well. They have some higher picks. Obviously, Josh Allen's probably the most notorious one right now, but they've invested a little bit into that defensive line. Let's move on to the wide receivers. So Jacksonville's really their secondary. I wouldn't say it's in shambles right now, but, there's not a ton there. I mean, they drafted C.J. Henderson in the first round. But other than that, not a ton of talent in this secondary right now, especially with the loss of Jalen Ramsey, obviously, and then also A.J. Bouye as well. So they lost a lot of talent in their secondary. What do you think the Colts can do, and how do you think they can exploit this weak secondary of Jacksonville?
Yeah, so I think this is almost like a perfect storm for us because you get a new quarterback that's, yes, he's worked with Frank Reich, but with a different team with different assets. So I think that it'll be a good week one matchup. Like, you want to take advantage of these weakened secondaries, and it'll give Phillip Rivers some live game action against a different opponent, against different schemes, stuff like that he'll be able to get in a groove with some of his top wide receivers. And, I'm really excited for this because, T.Y. Hilton obviously is probably going to draw the best corner on that squad, if whoever you think that'll be. But, that frees up guys like Paris Campbell, Zach Pascal, Michael Pittman Jr., guys that we want to see perform in this new kind of offensive here because we haven't really seen a lot of Campbell and we haven't really seen a lot of Pittman, honestly. So I feel like it'll be a really good matchup to try to mix those guys in and get in a groove with Rivers in this offense because I love the run game, but we're still going to have to pass it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it'll give these wide receivers some confidence. There's not a lot of known right now in this wide receiver group. I mean, T.Y. Hilton, but there's questions about his health. Zach Pascal, how will he look here now as a number 2, on the depth chart going into Jacksonville? So there's some question marks there. And obviously the guys you mentioned, Campbell, Pascal, Desmond Patman, some of those guys. But I think it's going to be good for their young guys getting their confidence. So that we feel like right now this is kind of a weaker matchup for these wide receivers, more of a favorable matchup for them. But when you're facing harder defenses and better defensive backs, it'll help you get some more confidence going into the season. So I definitely agree there. Let's move on to the quarterback matchup now. Obviously, the Colts last year, it felt like Jacoby Brissett was not the answer anywhere close to that. They go out and they sign Phillip Rivers to a 1-year, $25 million deal, bring him in for this season. Rivers, probably has the best overall roster on offense in terms of offensive line, running backs, wide receivers, all this stuff, and even defense. Give me your thoughts on Phillip Rivers and how he can potentially exploit this Jacksonville defense.
Yeah, so first off, you love him as a person, you love his personality, you love what leadership he brings to this team, and on his playing side too. I like how he fits into this offense because, we know how he likes to use his running backs, and we have 4 running backs that love to get heavily utilized. So I think this is a perfect combo there. And you also like, I think, a more stable presence at the quarterback position. Not that Jacoby couldn't get the job done, but I like to know that we have a guy that's proven he can do that, as a veteran in this league, has been in the tough situations and been able to win. So I like that leadership that he brings. But I think this is also a time, for Jacoby and Jacob Eason to learn from this and learn from each other and help each other out. But getting back to the point, I am super excited to see what he can do with this matchup here because, we keep talking about how weak this secondary is. This is the game that Phillip Rivers can build up his confidence, kind of shed some of the haters that have been, talking about his interceptions and all this. He can just focus, get right with this receiving core, and start to build some chemistry, because I think that's what's been hard to kind of get during training camps, especially not having any preseason games, having 2 live, quote unquote, if you will, scrimmages, but it's all against your own squad, all, everyone trying to stay safe and stay healthy. So I think it'll be really nice game for him to be able to start developing some chemistry with our receivers.
Absolutely. And really, Phillip Rivers has kind of owned the Jaguars every time he's played them so far. I mean, last year, even though the Chargers weren't a good team and Rivers had one of his worst seasons, he still was 16-22 for 314 yards and 3 touchdowns. So Phillip Rivers knows this Jacksonville defense. He knows how to exploit it. Certainly going to be exciting to see what happens. You already mentioned the running game, so let's talk about that for a second. I mean, the Colts have made a major emphasis this offseason to get better in the running attack. They were top 10 last year, but they want to be top 5. They add Jonathan Taylor, an explosive, dynamic runner, potentially the best running back in this draft class. And then you also have Nyheim Hines. You also have Jordan Wilkins as your number 4. I mean, the Colts ran really well against Jacksonville last year in the 2 matchups against them. And that was with, some of the players that they let go. So you got to think they're going to have a good matchup again against this Jacksonville defense. Give me your thoughts on how the Colts could exploit this potentially weak Jacksonville run defense.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, Jacksonville gave up the 4th most yards to running backs last season, and that was with all these pieces that they've traded away now. So now they even have less than that. So I think that couple that with our offensive line, I think we should be able to run the ball however we please, however often we like in this matchup here. But I think it's also important to get guys like Jonathan Taylor some more reps, get him in, his actual first live NFL practice here. And I think it's also good for the coaches, as they're saying, it's a 1A, 1B kind of situation with Mack and Taylor. It gives you the first look at the guys in action, see what they can improve on when you go up and face these tougher teams. And I think that's what's going to be important. They can focus on the little things, if you will, some of the stuff that might get overlooked when you're just trying to grind out a win, get that conversion on 3rd and 2, what have you. I think that this gives them time to really sit down, figure out what's working, and nitpick at the little things to hopefully become even better. And I would love to see all 4 backs mix it up in this matchup, because I think this is a type of game that you can do that and all 4 have equal opportunity at success here.
For sure. And the thing I think that's going to be huge, I think the Colts are going to control the clock. They're really going to do a great job at that with being able to run the football. They're going to be able to – I think they're going to destroy Jacksonville in time of possession, just being able to run the football the way they are able to. And I think that's going to be a big reason why Jacksonville's really not on the field a ton. The Colts are just going to run it down their throats like they want to do, and they can do that against Jacksonville, one of the weakest run defenses in the league. So let's move over to the other side. Let's move over to Jacksonville's offense versus the Colts defense. Let's start, since we started on the offensive line for the Colts, let's start with the offensive line for Jacksonville against the Colts defensive line. Now, this Colts defensive line is more revamped this year with DeForest Buckner. You have some younger guys that you think are up and coming. Danico Autry is your other defensive end right now alongside Justin Houston. But you got young guys, Ben Banogu, Al-Qadim Muhammad, as, some situational pass rushers type of guys. Tyquan Lewis was having a nice camp as well. Grover Stewart. Against this Jacksonville offensive line, which is really, struggled. They have a few decent pieces, but like a lot of the units on this Jacksonville team, it's a unit that's really struggling so far. So give me your thoughts on this offensive line versus the Colts defensive line.
Yeah, so, I just keep saying these are great matchups because they are literally all across the board great matchups here. What I think is going to be the most important thing to realize here about our defensive line is, yes, we have a lot of new pieces, but they have literally got to go up against one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. We just got done talking about how great our offensive line is and how they're going to be able to dictate the game. Our defensive line with guys like DeForest Buckner, Justin Houston, Danico Autry have gotten to go up against these guys all during training camps, all during practices and live scrimmages. So that's going to make them even better because, on the sidelines, they're working with each other. Like, hey, this is how I would react to this move. This is what I would do. This is what most guys do, so that they can game plan for that. And especially against an O-line like Jacksonville that's not, really great. I think that our defensive line has got a huge edge, and I'm a firm believer that you control the game by controlling the trenches. And if our defensive line can control the trenches in this one and keep Jacksonville's offense off the field even more than our offense can keep them off the field, I think, this is going to be a great day.
Over under 5 sacks. What do you think?
I might be a little ambitious, but I take the over. I think we have a really good shot. Yeah, I mean, you lose a guy like Leonard Fournette, it takes away that threat at running back. I think they're looking at starting a rookie and a first-year guy or a second-year guy, and then Chris Thompson is more of a receiving back. So I'll take the over on this one.
Okay. Yeah, I'm good with that. I would take that. I would like to repay Jacksonville from when they got 10 sacks under Jacoby Brissett in 2017. I would love to do that. That would just make it so sweet. Let's move over now to the wide receivers. Their wide receivers, Jacksonville's wide receivers, probably honestly a strength of this team. They have DJ Chark, they have D.D. Westbrook, they have Laviska Shenault, which they drafted this year. And we have to say, if there's any position on this defense that could potentially be the Achilles heel, it could be the defensive backs. There's some question marks. You kind of know who Rocky Ya-Sin had a pretty decent year last year, especially the second half of the season. They've said he's a rising player, have the Colts. But there's some question marks with Xavier Rhodes, and some depth question marks, some question marks with Malik Hooker. There's question marks all over in this secondary. This potentially, I feel like if Jacksonville is to exploit anything on this Colts defense, it would definitely be the defensive backs. But give me your thoughts, Jacob, against wide receivers against the Colts defensive backs.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm most worried about. Is you mentioned guys like DJ Chark, D.D. Westbrook. I mean, those aren't names that you laugh at here. And as much as we want to say, Jacksonville's not a great team, somehow these receivers find ways to have strong games and be heavily involved in the offense, even with, kind of up and down quarterback play. So they're definitely something you need to take seriously. And I do have a lot of concerns about the depth of our secondary. I mean, we have Kenny Moore, Rocky Ya-Sin, great. Go out and get Xavier Rhodes, okay, past his prime, can still provide a role. TJ Carey, and then you have Isaiah Rodgers, and I'm not as confident if someone like Rocky Ya-Sin or Kenny Moore goes down that we're going to be able to get similar production. And again, Malik Hooker, we didn't pick up his option. This is his season to do with what he pleases. Either prove that he needs to be signed to another contract on this team, or prove to another team that he needs to be signed. So I think we're a little up in the air about what we can get from Malik Hooker. And I just think staying healthy is going to be the key injury, or not the key injury, but a key to this game, because I felt like last season we were kind of up and down with injuries in the secondary that forced some of these guys to jump in early and prove that they could get the job done. But you also just want to have a stable unit, I think, in that secondary. So that's going to be something I'm really going to watch for in this game.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on now to our final thing, the final score predictions. Jacob, I'll let you go first on your score prediction. What do you have? Do you think the Colts are victorious? Do you think they lose? Give me your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I have this, it's going to be the Colts. I'm not even going to beat around this here. I got the Colts 24-10 because I think, like we talked about before, the Colts offense is going to keep Jacksonville off the field, and our defense isn't going to let them stay on the field for very long. So I'm giving them a touchdown and a field goal, but I really think we just control this game, and hopefully we can get, some running touchdowns, but also get Phillip connecting with some of our receivers for some passing touchdowns. So I have the Colts 24-10.
Okay, fair enough. I feel like just with the lack of preseason games, tackling is going to be a little bit more sloppy this year, especially to start the year. So I'm going to go 28-17. I feel like that's a little bit more than you'd like Jacksonville to score on you, but it's just going to be a little bit of a higher scoring game. So I do think that that'll be the score. I think Colts still win by a wide margin, but I think it's going to be a little bit higher scoring than we think. I know Jacksonville doesn't have a ton, but they still have some decent options at receiver. So I'm going to go that. And I think, we both have the Colts winning. They should win. And I've said this all along, Jacob. If there was any point in the last couple seasons the Colts should go into Jacksonville and they should win, it's this year. Jacksonville is clearly rebuilding. They're clearly looking to the future. They're not really putting a ton of stock into this year. The Colts need to go out and they need to go beat the socks out of Jacksonville in order to start the season off strong, man, and get to 1-0.
Yeah, I think this is really important that we start on the right foot, sets us up for for great success later on in the season. Like we said before, anytime you can get up in this division, you need to get up because, we all know what happens, weeks 5, 6, 7 after the bye week, stuff like that. So you want to make sure you're taking advantages where you can, and this is an advantage that the Colts can take. And also, we need to get all of our new pieces on the same page because you can only do so much in training camps and stuff like that. So I feel like I want to see them all together in live action against another team, and especially against an AFC South opponent.
Absolutely. Well, that'll do it for our preview of Colts versus Jaguars. Thanks, guys, for listening. Really appreciate all your support. Be sure to check out those articles on Colts Brawl. Be sure to check those out. But for Jacob and myself, thank you guys so much, and go Colts.